Shalom Aleichem and welcome to Online Smicha. Today we'll discuss a halacha in this week's Parsha, Parshas Mikeitz. When Yosef wanted that his youngest brother Binyamin should appear in front of him in Mitzrayim, so the brothers came to Yaakov to ask permission to let him go. So Yaakov was not happy, he was not willing. Vayomer Reuven el aviv leimer, so Reuven says to his father, Eshnei bonei tamis im lo yavienu elecha. You could punish my two sons if I take responsibility to bring him back, and if he doesn't come back, then you could punish my two sons. Now the Mefarshim have here basically two questions. What is the additional word in the pasuk leimer? And why does Reuven say Eshnei bonei tamis when Reuven actually has, at this point in time, he has 4 kids? And the answer which is given in some of the Mefarshim is that Reuven was basically saying, for every one of your sons, if it doesn't come back, you could punish 2 of my sons. Or, another way how to explain it, is not necessarily I only have 2 kids, but the punishment will only apply to 2 out of my 4 kids. The Eira Chaim HaKadosh, however, adds another flavor, and he says that Reuven knew that there's a mitzvah of Puru Uvu, and he's Mekoyim when he has 2 children, and therefore Reuven was ready to go on Mesiras Nefesh and for any benefits he has from Olam Hazeh. However, to put himself in danger of losing Olam Haba, he wasn't willing, and therefore he says, Ashnei bonei tamis. You could punish 2, but at least want 2 around, at least the mitzvah of Pru Avu I should fulfill, and I'll have an entrance to Olam Haba. And the response to that from Yaakov Avinu is basically what the Medrash says, and it's brought in Rabbeinu B'chaye, that Yaakov Avinu says, B'char shaita huzeh, this Reuven's request, it's not a smart thing that you're saying. Are they only your children and not my children? Obviously, I won't be happy to do that too. And as the Eira Chaim HaKadosh says, that Yehuda had to come along and go a step further and be willing to risk his schar, not only by Olam Hazeh, but even in Olam Haba, as he says, V'chatasi la'avi kol hayamim, and that's when he got the permission. Why does he say lamer? So the Eira Chaim HaKadosh says that Reuven was very careful in his speech. He did not want to say out clearly something negative like Ashnei bonei tamis. So Vayomer al aviv lamer, he said something to his father, and from the topic of conversation, the way he spoke, it was understood that he was willing to do so. Because Reuven was very careful not to be moitzi mipiv, not to express himself clearly in a negative form. And this is what we find that Chazal tell us in halacha, and it's brought in Shulchan Aruch, La yiftach al yiftach piv l'satan. A person should not open his mouth for the satan. Don't give a way in for the satan to hear something negative, and the satan could chas v'shalom be mekatreg, use that as part of a prosecution. As the Marsha says in Brachas, the Marsha says that when we say in Tachnun, Va'ata tzadik al kol ba'aleinu, everybody confesses what they did wrong, and we accept upon ourselves whatever Hashem's doing, tzadik ata al kol ba'aleinu, it's basically for the past. Whatever has been done, we accept upon ourselves. However, never mention that we're ready for Yisurim Achman al-Tzlan or anything to continue. Because the Satan is mekatrig b'shas, a person opens his mouth and says something negative. And that is actually what the pasuk says further. The pasuk says that Yaakov Avinu was not willing to let Binyamin go, because he said, V'korau asen, I'm afraid something bad will happen to him. Why? Explains Rashi, Ki asatan mekatrig b'shas sakana. Whenever there's a situation of a derech or a makom sakana, the Satan finds his way how to be mekatrig. According to the Ein Yaakov, the Pirush and Ein Yaakov, these two things work together. That when there is a makom sakana or a time of a sakana, that is when the Satan finds right to be mekatrig. So we see how important the koyach hadibur, the power of speech of every individual is, and how careful you have to be, and you know what kind of strong point this was by the Rebbe. The Chidah writes that you could learn from Moshe Rabbeinu, how Moshe Rabbeinu was Moshe Nefesh for Klal Yisrael, for every detail of Klal Yisrael. And because he only said as an option, Mecheni no b'sifrecha, Hashem, if you do not forgive the Klal Yisrael, then erase me from your Sefer. Just for mentioning that, he's not mentioned in Parshas Tzava. So if it affects something like Moshe Rabbeinu said, for a serious nefesh for Klal Yisrael, how much more each one of us has to be careful in what we say. Another example, the Minchas Elazar, the Munkach Rebbe, in his Sefer Darkei Chaim V'Sholem, writes that Nebuch, when somebody is making a mishaberach for somebody who's not feeling well, so you say mishaberach Avosenu Avram Yitzchak V'Yaakov, and you mention his name, but do not say hu yivarech or yirape es hachayla, because the Gemara says that a person should always daven shelo yechla, that he should not become sick, because if he becomes sick, he has to find zechusim why Hashem should heal him. So as long as you just say you're davening for somebody on behalf of somebody, fine. But when you're gonna you pronounce and you say that he is a chayla, then we have to find special schusim milamayla for Hashem to be willing or able to allow this bracha of refuah to come down. Thank you for joining us in this shir. Hopefully you could join us in Mirz Hashem next week and next halacha.